Glory to God. Okay, so I'm going to teach something today that's controversial, but it's needed. It's definitely needed. We're talking about angels today. And the thing about angels is they're all throughout Scripture. Man has known how to move with angels, but as we've gotten further along, that's all been forgotten. And this is how this thing came to me. I was watching on television yesterday, TV movie. Well, it was in theaters, but it was on television, on like TNT. It was Noah. You know the movie Noah that came out like a year or two ago with Russell Crowe? And it was a big Hollywood production. Like they had all the graphics and everything. It was a big Hollywood production. But the storyline was so off. And I'm like, people don't know anything about what happened then, and therefore you could just throw in a flood and then people will, oh yeah, well that's Noah. And they don't have any clue. And so as I did, I was up till like maybe 5 o'clock in the morning. Where we know a lot about angels, for whatever reason, we're not going to get into the reasons why, but a lot of the origination stuff is found in books for whatever reason were taken out of the Bible. That's a whole other talk. We're not going to talk about why they were taken out of the Bible. But the book of Enoch talks a lot about it. The book of Jasher talks a lot about it. The book of Jubilees. All these books have been taken out, which is weird because the Bible references them. So, like if we could go back in time, let's say we went back in time and we talked to Peter or we talked to Joshua. Like they would all recognize those books as part of canon, part of Scripture. But I have my reasons why. We're not going to get into that. But for some reason, they were taken out of our modern day Scriptures. And that's why people don't have an understanding of angels, because the books that really talk about angels and the origination of how they fell, how they operate, what their names were taken out. So now we don't even know what they were talking about. So I'm going to just read a couple scriptures that reference them, okay? In 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 17, it says, "And David lamented with lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher." So it's referenced there in 2 Samuel. In Joshua, you guys know this story. "Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said unto the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still upon Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed." You guys know the story where Joshua spoke to the sun, and the sun stood still? Okay. So the sun, okay. "And the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about the whole day." So it's referenced in the book of Joshua. But we don't have that book. In 2 Peter. "For if God's," this is 2 Peter 2, verse 4. "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly." So he's talking about a story that the book of Genesis only briefly mentions. I'm going to say that one more time. "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into the chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment." The book of Jude. The book of Jude is a very deep book. It's only a couple verses long. It's very short, but it's deep. And it gives us insight to know that these people knew stuff that we all didn't know. Like, what we need to understand is that when Paul and the first century church, they didn't have Bibles back then. You had to have the Holy Spirit of revelation, because they wouldn't get, like Paul would get up here and say, turn the book of Corinthians 2, verse. No. What they had was the ancient scripts, the ancient scrolls. Jude 1, verse 6. "And the angels, which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day." So Jude is talking about something that happened. And see, for us, when we talk about revelation, certain things, you have to piece it through certain prophets and certain things because it's not in chronological order. Genesis mentions it in Genesis chapter 6. Now, I spoke at length, this was probably about a year ago, when I talked about the world that was, the first flood. Were you all here when I talked about that? How the angels fell. I spoke about how the angels fell. Jesus said, I beheld Satan falling like lightning. This happened before Adam. When the angels fell, this happened way before God made man. And so it became so like, okay, let's go way back in time. God made the angels, angels are, no two angels are alike. Like each angel is like its own creation unto itself. It's funny how NASA and science are trying to find life form. I'm like, you know how many life forms there are on Earth that you might not be able to see with your eyes, but they exist? And so they're trying to find life out there, but I'm like, it's so much life here that you know not of. So God made this angelic creation, perfect in beauty. And they all had their own job. They all had their own specific task and job and duty. Lucifer was one of the high-ranking angels, and he had a tremendous responsibility. And he was over a certain group of angels. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but we know he fell. And when he fell, he took a third of them with him. Now, what we think a lot of times, we think that's what happened, and then God made Adam. No. It could have been millions of years, thousands of years, billions of years. We don't really know. We know it was a long time period that took place between the time they fell and the time when Adam came onto the earth. And I spoke in detail about what actually happened. I'm not going to talk about that, but what actually happened was there was a great flood. We call this Lucifer's flood. Lucifer's flood is found in various scriptures, not so much in Genesis, but in various scriptures via the prophets. In fact, let me touch on this for a little bit, because some of y'all looking at me like I got three heads. Go to Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Something happened between God created the heaven and the earth and verse 2, and the earth was without form and void. If you know anything about God, you know that everything that God creates is perfect and it's beautiful and it's like nothing else. So in verse 2 it says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. We're like, what is happening here? This is when the fall took place between verse 1 and verse 2. And there's a whole slew of scriptures. I can refer you to that other teaching we did in detail. But the point that I want to get across was, it says, without form and void. In the Hebrew is tavu vabohu. It means utter chaosness, confusion. That was upon the whole earth. And then if you do a word study, it's only like 3 or 4 other places that expression is in the whole scriptures. And when you see where that expression is referring to that period of what I call the world that was. So what happened was, when they fell, it was an instant cataclysmic event. Everything ceased to exist, life-wise. And the flood was not a flood like Noah's flood with water. What actually happened was the whole earth was frozen solid. Science talks about this as the Ice Age and things of that nature. But the whole earth was frozen solid. It didn't happen over a period of a couple days. It happened instantly. If you look at some of the fossils and things, you can find like dinosaurs had like food in their mouths. It happened like this. That's what we call Lucifer's flood. Everything was wiped away. So then in verse 3 it says, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So what's happening? We see the face of the waters. It's already done. It's already happened. Life is not in existence right now. Those creatures have been wiped away. Their spirits, of course. You can't wipe away spirits. But the flesh of them has been wiped away. And God's like, I'm about to replenish the earth. I used to wonder about that when I was reading this. Why would God tell a man to replenish the earth if he's just creating it for the first time? I always wondered about that. He's saying replenish the earth because it was stuff already here. He's saying take dominion because there's already fallen creatures here, but you have dominion over them. So, verse 3, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and that's when it begins, not the creation, the recreation of the earth. So I'm fast forwarding, because that's not what I want to teach on. I want to teach on Noah and that flood and that time period, because it's very relevant that we know that today. So God recreates everything, makes man. Of course, the spirits are there. Satan's there in the garden. Adam really didn't have a chance. Like, Satan's he's very cunning, even to this day. That's why I tell people, if you keep talking to him, you're going to fall. Look at the blueprint, which is Jesus. Every time the enemy tried to speak to Jesus, all he said was, "It is written." Shut him down instantly. All this going back and forth talking to him, in time, you'll be destroyed. He's very slick, extremely slick. And we've talked about that at length, so I'm not talking about that right now. But I'm just saying this, don't have conversations with him because you'll be caught up. So, where I'm going to fast forward to Genesis chapter 6. In Genesis chapter 6, Adam and his sons and Cain and his sons and everybody is on the earth at this time. The earth has been repopulated. Mankind is here. In Genesis 6 and verse 1, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the earth, and the daughters were born unto men, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Verse 3. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120. There were giants in those days, and also after that. One of the words giants is Nephilim. We're going to touch on that for a second. When the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men which were of old, and men of renown. Verse 5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, for he had grieved him with his heart. So it was so bad that God was like, I should never even have made man. It was like the whole earth was nothing but savagery, wickedness. Verse 7. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created upon the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for the repented that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So Noah was upright. So in all the Bible, that's all you have is those couple verses. The book of Jasher is 91 chapters. Enoch is like 35 or something like that. And that's just the first book that talks about what caused that. So I'm going to read some of that. And like I said, if you don't, this isn't required for your salvation. This isn't, because somebody can say, well, I don't believe that, that's a part of Scripture. That's okay. You can have your beliefs and understanding. I'm not going to debate that. But I think it's vital to have an understanding of why we are here where we are. Because things are happening again. Jesus, like in the days of Noah. So what happened then is happening today. But if we don't understand what happened then, we're bound to repeat history over again. I'm reading the book of Enoch chapter 6. And Simyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan but to do this thing. Then they swear all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And there were in 200 who descended on Jared, the summit of Mount Hermon. So what happened was 200 of them all got together and said, we're going to do this thing. The guy Simyaza, it was his plan. He's like, if I just do it, then I'm going to have to pay the price. But if we all do it, we're all going to say, bind together and bind an oath together and says, we're all going to do this thing. And so they plotted to come down to the earth and basically mess up mankind. So here's the thing, and this is why this is relevant today. Okay. It says the daughters of men slept with the sons of God. So in my thinking, I'm like, why would Because there has to be permission. There's certain spiritual laws, permission given. The sons, the fathers of these women, what they did was they gave their daughters to these creatures, and in return, they partook of heavenly truths. Certain things which were forbidden that they didn't know about. Because in heaven, there's certain revelations, there's certain things they learned by being in the heavenlies, being around God and godly angels, certain things they picked up. So they're like, we'll trade you. Remember I talked about the thing that made the enemy, Lucifer, so powerful is his ability to trade. Even to this day, that's what he does. He trades. So you take Aaron. Aaron has a great and powerful future. You know, God's speaking to you. You're growing rapidly. The enemy knows this. So is he going to come in the nighttime hour and scare you? No, he's not going to do that. He's going to present a trade to you. Say, hey, I have this. You take what he has, he's going to take your anointing. It's a trade, it's a switch. Take your future. So what happened back then, these men literally gave their daughters, and in return, they received certain things. So the question is, what did they receive? Let's go back to the book of Enoch, because it talks about this. It even names them by name. Azazel. Azazel taught men how to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, the art of working them, bracelets and ornaments. I'm debating how much of this I should share with, It talks about certain of these fallen angels. What they would do is they taught women like makeup. It says the beautifying of the eyelids, costly stones. It says as much fornication arose. They became corrupt in their ways. Semyaza taught about enchantments and root cuttings. Emeros, the resolving of enchantments. Baraziel taught astrology. Kokabel, constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. And Sariel, the course of the moon. Like it talks about all the things that these fallen angels taught people. Here's the thing, man. Now those angels that did that came down, like what Jude said, when they left their first estate, they were given rules and regulations once they have fallen. The rules and regulations about not interfering with the affairs of men, coming onto the earth. When they didn't do that, that's why they got chained up. But let me fast forward to present day. People are doing it to this day. Some of y'all know, I worked in the music industry. I know how they would sell their soul in return for success. And every single person that's done that, yeah, they might have success for 2 or 3 years. And then if I said some names from the 80s or 90s or 2000s, you're like, who? So they exchange what they have for something that these fallen spirits have. So, okay, let's go back to the story. I'm in Enoch chapter 9. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel. These are the archangels, the holy angels. There's 7 of them. It lists 4 right here. It says, and Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon men. And they said one to another, the earth made without inhabitants cries the voice of their crying up into the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, bring our cause before the Most High. So, it's such, I don't think we understand how wicked the earth was. How crazy it was in those days. It was full of wickedness. This is even before Noah was even born. So during these days, I'm going to summarize this. During these days of wickedness, Enoch is born. Enoch is born and it's already wicked. But Enoch despised the wickedness. Enoch loved God. He was righteous. So he went away. He went off into the wilderness and went away from all of that and began to call upon the Lord and seek him and seek righteousness. For many, many, many years, that's when he was away from all the crazy stuff. And God began to build him up. God began to raise him up. He became a great and powerful man. He had great influence. Okay? So, I'm going to fast forward this because it's a lot of information and it's points that I want to get to. This is making sense what I'm saying? Okay. So, Enoch, who I believe was like the first prophet, when the cries of man, because it was so wicked, the cries of men went up to heaven. I read in chapter 9 of Enoch, when the book of Enoch, when the angels, the archangels were like, earth is crying out. At the same time, Enoch is becoming a powerful and great man, strengthened by God. God calls him up to heaven. While he's in heaven, he hears God speak to him and declare judgment for those fallen angels. Now, it's one thing if I'm prophesying to you all. It's nothing if you prophesying to fallen angels. That's what Enoch did. Enoch was given a message to speak to all those angels led by Semyaza. I think that's his name. Semyaza was the leader of all. He's the one that gathered them all up. So Enoch comes back to the earth, and he said that all the angels were trembling because they knew the voice of God was about to come to them. So he tells them, there will be no peace among you. That was the word. There will be no peace among you because you know what you did. You went against the laws of God, and judgment is coming. They were so terrified. This is what they did. This thing blew my mind when I was reading this. What they did was they all gathered together and petitioned Enoch to intercede for them back to God. So they're sorry, they repented. They were like, Enoch, go back up to heaven and tell God that we're sorry we did it. And, it was Semyaza, it was his fault, basically. See, history repeats itself over and over and over and over again. This one, Lucifer, wasn't the one that Semyaza could convince all them other ones to go get them those ladies. And they followed Lucifer. Things repeat themselves. But here's the thing. This is a theme that you must get about the demonic kingdom. Let's say, I'm going to use you, man. Let's say Joseph over there. Let's say Joseph falls into sin. And it's a price for that. What he's going to do is he's going to try to get other people to fall into sin with him. Joseph is already condemned. Semyaza was already condemned for his plan. He got all the other ones to be condemned as well. Don't fall for it. I've seen it happen so many times. Somebody falls off into some crazy teaching. Like right now, this big teaching about there is no hell. I don't know if you've been, this is big teaching that came out in the 80s. No one really bought into it. But now I'm on Facebook, it's really God is not gonna eternally punish people. I'm like, what scriptures are y'all reading? So things come back. They come back. So back to the story. So Semyaza, they get all the other fallen angels together, and they're like, look, petition God. Go back to heaven and tell God that, we didn't mean it. So he does. He goes back up to heaven, goes before God, and God's like, no, there's no forgiveness of this. You knew the laws, what you did, and that's it. So then he comes back and he declares, look, there's no forgiveness for you. See, here's the thing, though. All this happened, and he even went further on when he came back the second time. He's like, there's going to be a great flood, and you're all going to be wiped out, you're going to be chained up. But at the time that happened, the flood didn't happen until many, many, many years after that. Here's the thing we must understand. When God speaks a word, it doesn't happen right away. And over the course of time, people think that God either is not going to stick to his word, or it was from man, we missed it. No, it will happen. Jesus will come back. People think because he's delayed, or because even this could be a prophetic word about this is going to happen to you. I told you my story about my journeys into the prophetic, where a word came to me about how I would operate on this certain level. I don't think it's going to happen that week. It didn't happen that week. It takes time. But the words don't fall to the ground. Hold on to those words. prophecy, you must hold on to it. So in this story, it was a long time before the flood actually happened. And when it happened, everything that was spoken, it became to pass. So on the earth at this time, let's do a snapshot. At the earth at this time, there were fallen angels. There were half human, half angelic, demonic beings. In the flesh, Nephilim, giants, and there was wicked men. That's what the earth was full of in this day. Like, I'm not talking about like half the earth. I'm talking about the whole earth, excluding one family. Wickedness filled the whole earth. There was fallen angels, which were the ones we talked about. There was 200. Remember, so there was 200 of them that fell. The Nephilim, half human, half angelic, demonic beings, and wicked men. So, God always has a remnant. He always has a remnant. In this remnant was a family, Noah. Noah taught his children the right way. As they grew up and it's multiplying, the flood begins. And you guys know the story. The flood begins and it wipes out all the living creatures on the earth, except for the ones that were in the sea and everything like that. So, those half human, half angelic beings, as they perished, because remember, they're spirits. The spirits, as they left their bodies, were roaming the earth. Those are disembodied spirits. That's what we call demons today. They were on the earth, and they seek rest in people. In 2 Chronicles chapter 20, when the children of Israel were facing pending destruction from 4 different armies, each larger than their own. Now, when you're faced with something like that, there's nothing you can do. So, they got the Urim and the Thummim, to see what they should do. And the angel, the voice of God was like, I need you to send Judah. Judah was the praisers. Send the praisers to the front of the army. And all I want you to do is have them praise. So they get up there, they're praising, they're singing their songs, they're clapping with their instruments. And the one who's writing the book, like if you're a journalist looking at it, you would look at it, it looks like those armies started fighting each other. That's what it looked like. They just started fighting each other until they all killed everybody. Now, in actuality, that's not what happened. As they were praising God, as they were opening up their mouths and releasing praise into the atmosphere, what actually happened was they gave the angelic realm permission to invade and act on the affairs of men, and those angelic beings slaughtered all the enemies of God. So as you praise, because prayer and praise is in the same family. It's you opening up your mouth and declaring the goodness and awesomeness of God. And when you do that, angels will come onto the scene and fight your battles for you. So that's what happened. In Jehoshaphat was the king who declared it. And Jehoshaphat, he sent them out there. They were praising God. And those armies killed themselves. Now, when you read it, it doesn't make sense, because if all the armies fought against themselves, there will be one army left. There wasn't one army left. They were all destroyed. In your life today, many of you have many things coming against you. And you have no rational, logical way how to make it out of that situation. But the answer to what you need to do is exactly what Jehoshaphat told his people to do, and that is to worship God, to praise God, to pray. And when you do that, you give the Lord God Almighty and his host of angels, you give him permission to operate in your life. Let's take it a step further. You could be in a situation you don't even know what to pray for. You could have so many enemies against you. I've been in that place. You got so many things coming against you. That's why God said, I'm going to give you a secret weapon. And this secret weapon, you might not even know what to speak, but my spirit, which is inside of you, knows what you need, and all you need to do is speak what the Spirit is saying, and it will automatically come unto you. I'm talking about your heavenly prayer language. Speaking in tongues, my God. You give heaven permission to operate in your life. I remember I was in a dark place, a couple of years ago. And it was like, I had so much against me. My relationship was in shambles. My money was upside down. I knew God wanted me to do ministry, but it was no outlet for that. Everything was just a mess. And I remember I went to go see this man of God, this prophet named Bob Jones. He's since gone home to be with the Lord. But I was still living in Georgia at the time. And I remember he called me up, and he said to me, he said, your life, you're going through a tough time right now. And he looked at me, he was about in his 80s then. He looked at me and said, but this time next year, everything will be different for you. Now, if you heard that, you're like, oh, that was a generic word. Like nowadays, we want somebody's first name, last name, their social security number. You had eggs and I'm seeing eggs and bacon you had for breakfast on Tuesday. No, that was Thursday. That's what we want. We want that level. And I love the level of accuracy. But you have to receive what the Spirit of the Lord is saying. Like words have to be received. And so I was at this low place. And I chose to believe this man of God. I chose to believe him. And sure enough, the following year, everything was different the following year. Everything was different. I came out here to LA. I had, ministry was moving, healing was flowing. Everything. I was in a toxic relationship that was divinely broken up. Everything was different. So, it's vitally important that we understand and we receive what thus saith the Lord. And that ties into my message about we need to understand and how to cooperate with the angelic realm. Now, I always have to have a disclaimer because someone's always going to go and make this weird. We're not worshiping angels. You call upon the name of the Lord. You call upon Jesus. And he has freely given you this help. So the revelation, I've said all that to say this. I brought you to this place right here. We're moving into a new place. This is 2018. A new place, a new revelation. And this new revelation is how to cooperate with the angelic realm. If you want to go deep prophetically, you have to have a relationship with angels. You have to. You have to. And that's what God is revealing to us in our day and age. So, I want to share 3 main points from this book of Enoch four main points from the book of Enoch that show us revelation. The first one, I kind of touched on the first one, is that trading. The fallen angels traded what they had for what man had. And that still happens today. It still happens today. But it's all a deception. For what we need to understand is what you have is already greater than anything that they will try to trade you. You see, it's all in deception. Those men on the earth, what they could have done is just got with God. That's what Enoch did. And Enoch had far more revelation and power than any of those men that had fallen. Another point, this is kind of tied into the first point. When God was speaking judgment to the fallen angels, one of the things that he said was, the things that you shared with men are minuscule compared to the heavenly revelations. In other words, men were selling out their whole families for how to do makeup, how to make weapons, how to, stupid stuff. And God is like, what we have here, I haven't even shared it with you. So the revelation from the book of Enoch is that it's stuff that God knows, the secret stuff that God knows, is far greater than anything the fallen angels know. Okay, let me go to you on that. There's different levels of revelation. There's different levels of wisdom. There's man's wisdom. Man's wisdom is stuff that you go to school for. You learn how to read, how to write, math, history, things like that. People are struggling because they don't know anything. People are perished for lack of knowledge. The Bible says you perish, you die because of lack of knowledge. It's stuff you're just not going to learn in school. Most people live their lives based on what their family taught them, their mom told us this, their grandparents, and they live at a certain level. Whether we're talking about income, poverty, you live your life according to what you know, and what you know is mostly taught from your family or your schools. So then there's the demonic world. The demonic world has more revelation than natural man's world. So that's why a demonic spirit comes to you and says, look, I can give you this information that's far more than what you learned in school. Far more than what your mother or your father taught you. And so what they did was they would trade that for what they had. That's where you get stuff like Illuminati and all these stuff like that. They're trading hidden secret knowledge that's beyond man's knowledge. And they would have secret groups and societies that would give this information to man. It's all secretive, secret society. It's all secret information. Even to this day, that happens to this day. But here's the key. Because I don't want to focus on that. What I want to focus on is that third level of wisdom, that third level of revelation. That is the information that comes straight from God. If we could only tap into that, and that's what's being released in the earth today. Matthew chapter 14, when Jesus is with his disciples, they're like, who do men say that I am? Some say you're Elijah, some say you're Jeremiah, some say you're so-and-so. Out of nowhere, Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you, but my Father which is in heaven. Know this. Know this, know this, know this. What you have access to. Let's go deeper, let's go deeper. There's this realm. I'm about to go deeper. We might just end this because some of y'all looking at me with glazed eyes. There's this realm here, right? And that's like I told you about, like, school and stuff like that. Then there's the second heaven, which is the atmospheric heaven. That's where information is, like in the spirit. That's how I can pick up something in the spirit. Like last week when I spoke to Lynn, she was said something about floating, or so I don't even really remember. But I picked it up from the second heaven. That's where the realm of information and knowledge is. That's why, like there was a prophet that I know. He said something, and then it was like 3 weeks later, like a psychic said the same thing. They're like, he's a false prophet. No, he's not a false prophet. He's pulling from that realm of information. That's why you can't tell someone is real or fake from how accurate a word was. But that's in that second realm, that second atmospheric heaven. But the third heaven is God's kingdom that only you have access to. That's what Jesus meant when he said, only my Father which is in heaven revealed this unto you. You see there is validity in the New Age world with psychics and mediums and all. Yes, they do operate at a level that's beyond this human realm. But they don't go to the third heaven. And what God is saying is he's looking for a people who will just totally surrender themselves that can operate on this level. Oh my goodness. This third level. This third level. There it is. Let me just share what happened just now. I flow off of impressions. Impressions come to me. And then if I pause too long, sometimes it'll lead. I gotta wait, bring it back. Okay, so we brought it back. In the book of Exodus, this is what he just downloaded with me. In the book of Exodus, as Pharaoh me strike that. As Moses was doing various miracles, Pharaoh was like, I'm not sweating that, Moses. I got a crew of boys that can do what you just did. That little snake trick that you just did, come on, boys, you do that too. And they did it on a lesser level, but they did it. And the next miracle, they did the same thing. See, until you step out and really are used by God, the world can't tell who's the difference. But after the fourth, fifth miracle, those magicians said, look, this is the finger of God. We can't do this.
Amen.
Up until the low levels, they were copying what Moses was doing. Once they stepped into the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, once they get higher levels, not only could the magicians not do, but they were trying to see cover like everyone else. And what God is saying to us today, it's time for us to step into that next dimension. It's time for us to stop trying to be like the world and copy and do this and do that and go to a place that the world has not seen before. Eyes haven't seen it. Ears haven't heard it. Some of y'all were at that meeting I had on Wednesday. Kamala, you were there. Amanda, you were there in West Hollywood. And the presence of God was strong at that meeting. And I was speaking stuff. I wasn't like prophesying. For a couple of you I did prophesy. But it was mostly what the Spirit of the Lord was saying on what is to take place. And the main thing that is to take place is eyes haven't seen this. Ears haven't heard this. What's getting ready to happen on planet Earth. Can I go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
The stories of Enoch, it's written. We can read it. What happened with Moses, it's written. We can read it. Daniel, David, these were all great and powerful men of God. Then the first century church with the apostles, men that moved just like Jesus moved. Powerful. But what the Spirit of the Lord is saying in our generation is what happened back then. Brace yourselves, for what he's going to do through you has not been seen on planet Earth. Enoch didn't do what he's going to show out through you. Like the apostles did not do what he's going to do through you all. For Jesus himself said, whosoever believeth in me, the same works that I do, you will do. In fact, you will do greater works. Now, there has been some great works. I'm not denying that. But you are going to see with your own eyes dynamic works of God being done. I even said it on I think I said it. I either said it or I said it in a dream. Because sometimes things get all jumbled up. But I remember speaking about how I was seeing this happening. They were filming live on like a TV news type thing. A guy was ministering in like Dallas. And then instantly he was ministering in like Detroit. And like going to different cities. Like stuff like that. We haven't really seen. We've seen bits and pieces of it. But you're going to start to see things like that. Translations and miracles that will just baffle people's minds. Prophetic words that are so accurate, it's like it's from the mouth of God himself. And that's why he wants us to pray now. Like this is a season of prayer. Being in intense prayer, hearing instructions from heaven. So, stick with God, and you'll get far greater than anything that the fallen world, they don't know. It talks about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. It said, which none of the princes of this world knew. For if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. The third thing, Enoch was elevated to a position higher than any of the fallen angels and even the Nephilim. So when all the world was trading back and forth, and you see that to this day, man. I don't want to bust anybody's bubble about like yoga and things like that, but it's things like that that they taught people. Like I went to India. In India, like the stuff that I spoke about how certain of those fallen angels would teach this and teach that, well, that's what they taught those people. That's why you go to certain places and they've been doing certain things for literally thousands of years. I'm not talking about 1 or 2,000. I mean like 5,000 years, like some of these civilizations. They've been doing certain cultic practices, occult practices for thousands of years. Those fallen angels taught them how to do that. But in Christ, if we would just stick to what we have, if we would just go after with everything that we have, God would freely give it to us. The fourth thing I want to talk about that's taken from the book of Enoch is it gives an account of the glory of God. The account that it gives, like, this is what we think. We think, Enoch went up. Enoch went up into heaven, and he's like a superstar in heaven, and everyone's they're like, no. Like, he had a glimpse of what it was like in that realm of heaven. And as you get closer, he said he looked and he saw, like, he who sat on the throne. And he said nobody could look. Like, it's so bright, like you can't even look. Like, you know it's there, but you can't look. It's almost like looking at the sun. You can't really look at the sun. You know, like, but you can't look at it. And that's a very, like, dumbed down version. Because the glory is so mighty. The glory is so mighty, you can't get but so close. My prayer for this ministry is that the glory of God rests so mightily in here. And we were praying for that before y'all came in. That the glory of God is so mighty. You cannot deny it. I remember watching this video with Catherine Kuhlman, and they were trying to bring this couple up. But it was like the glory of God was so powerful in the place. Like, they could not come but so, like where Aaron is at, like they couldn't come any closer than that. And they tried to, but it was like they couldn't come any closer. God is releasing that in the earth today. On a greater measure.